Hello, everyone. How are you going? Hopefully, you've had a great weekend of FPL. We are here ready to go. It has been a big weekend for everyone. Damo, how you going?
Not bad, mate. Not bad at all. It's been a pretty good week of FPL for me, so I'm very happy, mate.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to start. You can see by the title that we are going to go through a bit of a different type of conversation this week, guys. So what we'll go through first, as we always do, is we'll go straight through and look at the teams from last week. But if you are here in the chat, make sure you give the stream a like, or if you're watching after the fact, make sure you like the video, get in the comments as well, and make sure you subscribe here at FPL Dopata. And if you want to see mine and Damo's journey separately, our channel names are both on the screen there for you. So we have a bit more detailed videos of our teams individually. We try to keep the podcast more about the discussion versus what we're particularly going to do each with our team. So if you want that extra bit of detail, make sure you do go and see our channels independently. So let's get straight into it. Dom's not here tonight, but I've got Dom's team up on screen. Dom was the lowest scorer between us with 72 points, which he hit the average on the nail this week. Very high average this week, wasn't it, Damo?
It was a very high average, mostly inflated by Haaland and his big haul of points. And unless you didn't captain him, everyone's in the same boat with the amount of points. So even though that 5.3 million average ranking, in the Gameweek ranking sort of thing, everyone's kind of in the same boat. The difference between me and Dom is like, 15 points, and I'm like 900k. So for the game week, right?
Everyone's
it is a very close week for points.
Yeah. So noticeable players that Dom had different to us was Rico Henry. Bit probably frustrated that they didn't keep a clean sheet, and it was Rico Henry who was at fault for one of the goals as well. Which wasn't ideal. And then Dom has the Gusto, Chilwell, so the double up Chelsea defence, and you've got double up Chelsea defence, but a different second defender other than Chilwell. And then Dom's other main variable in his side, he's got Rashford as well, who that's probably saved the day for him scoring this morning. But then also Diaby, who could have had a return as well if Bailly or Watkins wanted to shoot against Liverpool from the 6-yard box. And Diaby did look okay. He gave John McGinn that chance that he put over the bar as well. So on another day, Diaby does return for Dom, and he's absolutely laughing with some really good differentials. On the bench, he had João Pedro and Estupiñán, and as most people do, have Matt Turner. So that's Dom's side. I haven't actually spoken to him about what he wants to do transfer-wise, but I'm sure he'll update us on that later in the week. I will get my team up as well. So I sat in the middle on 77 points this week, so a little bit better off. Pickford, Chilwell, Estupiñán, and Udogie with the assist save for the day for Maddison's goal for me.
Second assist in a row.
Yep, second assist in a row. He's got the assist and the clean sheet the week before, when I had him on the bench. But then my whole midfield actually returned, which was surprising, but they all only returned once. So Matoma got an assist, Saka got an assist, Salah got a goal, and then Mbeumo got a goal. So if you told me that my whole midfield was going to return, I would have been pretty happy with it. But Salah on another day gets another minimum one assist and could potentially score, a one-on-one as well. Saka, I've watched the extended game there, and he really wasn't involved at all. He did have a chance from the 6-yard line that he hit straight at Onana right towards the end of the game, and he panicked. And again, Saka's ownership, though, being at 66%, it would have been nice when I'm someone who doesn't own Bruno or Maddison. But I think a lot of people own Saka, and it would kind of negate itself a little bit. Matoma's actually been really nice for me. He's returned 3 times in 4 weeks, and the only time he didn't was against West Ham in a really tough game that they struggled in. I think he's kind of breaking the mould a little bit. And when you look at his fixtures, you've got Man United coming out of an international break with a defence that we don't know who's going to play there. Then Bournemouth and Villa. He's someone I'm probably going to end up holding, although my plan initially was to get rid of him after the first 3 weeks. So that's changed a little bit. You can see that João Pedro's ended up in my starting 11 because Vardiol got the pet roulette. So I thought he was going to be locked in with Ruben Diaz. That was proven wrong. And Ake and Akanji both came in, and Ake got a return. So I don't quite know what the future is for Vardiol, and I'm going to talk to you guys about him a little bit later on. Haaland, captain, we've spoken about. And Nicholas Jackson, I was just saying to Damo before we went live, has been although the data's there, has been the big regret for me, because the decision I made was Jackson over the extra midfielder, and I made that call right at the deadline for game week 1, and I went out of a 3-5-2 into a 3-4-3 with João Pedro, and that's probably cost me almost 15 points or so this season with only one return coming from Nicholas Jackson. So that's sort of the rundown of where I'm at. I'm around the 1 million mark anyway. I think I'm at 1,090,000 or something. So look, end of the day, it could be a lot worse. I've seen a lot of good people that are like near the 2 million area because, they've had Nicholas Jackson and they've had other guys that haven't returned. So it could be a lot worse. So let's bring up your team, Damo, and let you go to work on the 10 points that you got ahead of me with.
Yeah, so look, double defence like Dom, Colwell and Chilwell, something that I am planning on holding longer term. The fixtures are just too good, I think, for Chelsea to waste a transfer and getting him out before Bournemouth, Villa, Fulham and Burnley from a defensive standpoint. I know they've been a bit leaky, but Chilwell has been very aggressive. And Levi Colwell for 4.5 mil. There's potential for clean sheets there, and hopefully he finds one again. Stupien is another one that, we will be looking at some future transfers. It was very close to a clean sheet, so I feel a little bit hard done by. We're really targeting that Bournemouth fixture. And then, look, we'll get on to Cameron Archer, because if you watch my personal video, I taught this pick up a lot, and I'm glad it definitely paid off. But I just want to speak about the midfield. Madison's been sensational. Had him since game week 1. Yet again, right areas. I watched the extended highlights. So even though this game was the goal rush for us, I'll rewatch the highlights back, because I generally do with most games. And he was yet again essential. Dropping in, picking up the ball, passing balls, you name it. And Mbuemo's in Mbuemo, best 6.5 mil. We called it at the start of the season. You see why. Saka, probably arguably his worst game this year. Still got a return. And I just want to touch on Salah, that if Martinez has to pull off a world-class save and Darwin goes with a normal head and not trying to put his boot next to his head, Salah's got 2 goals and an assist there. So,
and the same when Darwin hits the post as well. Darwin ends up like the Matty Cash own goal too. That was off a Salah assist.
Yeah, so there was potential that Salah could have walked away with like 3 returns. I know FPL, let's talk FPL, we keep saying it's like 24 returns in 21 games or something like ridiculous.
And 10
it's someone that I'm definitely looking at potentially transferring out, but I'm not too sure.
It's going to be a long international break.
Yeah. And I want to speak about Cameron Archer here quickly. I did call it. I did put him in. I said I was targeting Everton on my video. I said that I just think that Cameron Archer wearing the 10 is going to be the main focal point, and Sheffield looked decent enough against City to take a punt on this one. And look, you watched the game with me, Paul. I was over your house. He looked fantastic, getting in the right areas. A couple of times with a bit of a better ball, he would have got in as well. So, I'm very happy that I got Cameron Archer into the team there.
Yeah, so look, I think that puts you around the 46,000 mark as well. So through 4 game weeks, you're absolutely flying. Have had some really good 50-50s go your way, and it shows that, for me, if our teams aren't that different, where I've got Jackson, you had Pedro plus the extra midfielder, and then this week, you made a really bold decision to go with Archer. A couple big, and I've gone Vardiol, who then doesn't play, then I then get Pedro. But I was celebrating when Man City did concede, because I knew that if they'd kept a clean sheet, I would have been absolutely filthy. So don't panic is probably my message. We've said it every week so far. Don't panic if the rank's not there just yet, because 34 game weeks to go. It's a lot that's going to happen.
It's a long time. We've seen people, me last year, Paul, I was like 5.2 mil at some stage last year.
Yeah.
And I finished into the top 350K, whatever it was. I don't know.
And then
I'll get the exact
overall,
335.
Yeah.
I was out the like 5.2, 5.7 mil last season.
Yeah.
Transferring Haaland out, you name it. And I got to 335K. I think my second Charles League, I was inside the top 30K or something. So, as long as you keep making the best decision moving forward, and this is what this stream and this video is going to be a bit about, a podcast, when it's uploaded in podcast form, is about how do we make our best decision from now to a potential wild card, if that's game week 9, 13 or 19.
Perfect. So, as the title says, let's get straight into it. So the reason I want to talk about wildcards now is it's topical, because people panic in this international break. So people go, we've been playing for a month. I don't know what I'm doing. I've got Nicholas Jackson. I've got the X and Y. I've got Eze potentially, and the thing with Eze is probably that he got the goal this week, and that's probably saving a lot of people that have Eze from making that decision as well. Panicking around defences, not getting clean sheets. So that's where we've come up with the little discussion. So hopefully you guys get something out of it today. Let's get into it. So I'm going to share my screen once again. So if you are listening on the podcast, I do apologise because it's going to be very heavily reliant on the information in front of us. So what I've got set up here is the fixtures for the attacking players from game week 9 to 19. So we're going to go through some different options. Damien and I, we're going to start off with game week 9. You've probably looked at this a little bit more than I have, Damo, as well.
Yeah.
If we're targeting a game week 9 wildcard, what teams are you targeting for the fixture swing in game week 9?
I'm targeting Salah straight off the bat. Obviously, I have him at the moment, but he could potentially come out before my wild card, which is ludicrous to say. But, their first 3 fixtures, 9, 10, and 11, is Everton, Nottingham Forest, and Luton.
And the first 2 of those are at home as well.
Correct. And look, Haaland's never coming out your team, but Haaland's first 2 there are Brighton at home. Decent fixture. Man United away. And look, it's Haaland. He's a robot. He knows how to score. I'm very much in the camp of wildcard game week 9. Salah's in your wildcard, and he is captainable, and I would captain him in against Everton and Forest at home. Main reason I think that in the 2 harder fixtures for Haaland, you take the upside of Salah popping off, and then make a big decision on game week 11, where if Luton really do look as horrid as they have been at times, and Bournemouth have been relatively okay, so to say. I do think they're going to go and try and press City and get absolutely annihilated, to be fair. But, there's potential to even captain Salah in game week 11. So if you're targeting a game week 9 wildcard, I think you're going Salah with the potential of captaining Haaland, and then you're probably looking at targeting another Liverpool asset on top of that. It may be Trent after what you just saw from Trent. It may be Diaz, because Diaz has looked good. And if we see Darwin continue to start and get in these good areas, it probably could be Darwin as well.
Yeah, so what I see from an attacking perspective, so what Villa gave Trent last night was so much time and space to be able to pick those passes out, but that also came with their defensive line being really, really high at the same time, so there was then space to play the ball in behind. When you're playing teams like Everton, might not be a Trent game per se, if Everton is going to sit back, but it also means that Trent might push further forward and get on the ball and do the creative stuff. But when you look at these teams that we're playing, Forest, then Luton away, then Brentford, City, Fulham, Sheffield United, Crystal Palace, Man United, Arsenal, Burnley, they're all teams that want to play football. They're not really teams that are going to sit in 2 banks of 4 or 4 and a 5 and say, break us down, which is good for Trent. So I agree with you on the Trent factor. And then it gives us a bit of time between now and game week 9 to see, all right, who's going to be nailed in? There's Europa League. What's Liverpool's philosophy going to be around the Europa League? Is it going to be a chance for the kids to play and the rotation players? So then we know that they're actually going to be locked in for the league. So someone like a Diaz, someone like a Nunes could be absolutely great value going into game week 9. The other advantage of a game week 9 wildcard for me is Brighton. For the same reason as Liverpool, we get another month or 5 weeks, I guess, worth of data of who's locked in, because Ansu Fati needs to come into this team, number one. There's no way they're going to sign him on loan and not use him. So we need to see who misses out or who's losing minutes in that exchange. But then is Evan Ferguson going to be the main striker moving forward? Because we also do need to find ways to money. Brighton don't start off fantastically. They get Man City away in game week 9. But again, if you're on a wild card, you should be able to structure your team so that whatever Brighton asset you have can be on your bench. But then you get Fulham, Everton, Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest, Chelsea, who are struggling, Brentford, Burnley, Arsenal, Palace, Tottenham through 10 game weeks. That is a very, very good run for the Brighton assets, especially someone like a Matoma, who you could just plug him in and he can get returns at any point. So I'm really excited for Brighton. Estupinan could be someone that comes back into our teams, unless you don't want to lose the value and you're just prepared to ride him for the next 4 weeks, and then you ride him all the way to game week 19.
Yeah, correct. And I think with the Brighton assets, it's going to be the case of who are the most locked players that won't get rotated that are going to get returns, and it's going to be one of the Estupinan with a Ferguson or a Matoma by the looks of it at the moment. I think for what it's worth, I think Ferguson is going to eventually become very nailed. with Joe Pedro, and I think Welbeck will be the one that makes way. I think they look better when Welbeck isn't playing, and something that I think they're craving out for. I think the next team then everyone will be targeting, if you're looking game week 9 or even game week 13 or 12, I should say, is an Aston Villa. If you do it in game week 9, you get West Ham at home, Luton at home, Forest away, Fulham at home with your first 4 fixtures post a game week 9 wildcard. I think if you're coupling Watkins with a Darwin, with a Salah, with a Diaby, with a Matoma, with a Bremo, you've got 3 6.5s, arguably the best midfielder in the game in Salah, and you've got 2 really explosive forwards. It's something to look at. Obviously, that's depending on funds. It depends if you want Salah. But from what I'm looking at Villa is this Matty Cash role. He's playing more right wing than he's right back. So very much where we've got Chilwell because he's playing left wing, it may be that this Matty Cash role continues and we really look at Matty Cash getting in backstick winning headers and tap-ins and whatnot. Maybe he comes into the team as well.
Yeah, the only concern I've got with Matty Cash is the health of the centre-backs, but I'll talk to that a little bit later because what we saw was as soon as Diego Carlos came off, the sub was that a winger came on and Cash dropped in the right back and Consa slid over to centre-back. So there's that little nugget to unfold and we'll see what goes on with Diego Carlos. So the only other team that really jumps out to me in the Game Week 9 wild card is Newcastle because, again, they go Crystal Palace, Wolves, Arsenal, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Man United, but Chelsea, Man United, Arsenal all at home.
Yep.
Then Everton, Tottenham, Fulham, Luton, Forest. So very, very good from attacking and defensive fixtures for Newcastle. Again, though, at this stage, I wouldn't know who to target because we've seen Alexander Isak look pretty good, but then he comes off all the time. The wingers aren't, for me, they're not really what I want to see. I'd like to see Harvey Barnes get a run of games and see if he can actually have a bigger impact from the start. You're not touching any of their centre midfielders for attacking returns. Trippier is obviously a standout defensive option, but at 6.5, do you want to use that money elsewhere? There's a few questions. And then you've got sort of the Botman Burn, 4.5 type defenders that, if you want to try and play the clean sheet game, that, they're there and get the potential attacking return, or even someone through Fabian Schär. I think he's 5.5, so he's kind of that middle bracket between Trippier and the 4.5s. And he's probably, their back four is pretty well nailed each week. They don't really rotate a whole lot, even though they've got that Lewis Hall that's come in at left back.
Correct.
But is there anyone that's really taking your eye at Newcastle that you might consider in a Game Week 9 wildcard at this stage?
Look, for me, it's going to very much depend on the next few fixtures because their fixtures are about to swing to a good set. And it's one of the reasons why if I'm looking at Game Week 9, my Salah might come out and then come back so it can fun maybe to get into a Trippier. And that's kind of my gauge of if I'm going to do that and they are playing well and that the defensive numbers have been decent against hard sides. The defensive numbers remain good against lesser sides who aren't going to be as clinical. They might turn out to be good assets, Trippier going forward and back. And maybe Isak, because I think the way it's going to go is Isak's going to start, play 65, and then it's going to be Wilson off the bench every game week, generally. It'd be interesting to see what they do with Europe as well. They're in the Champions League, tough group.
Yep.
Be interesting to see what happens with Newcastle. I definitely think in a Game Week 9 wildcard, there's potential to have a couple of options there. I just don't know who's going to be the best one moving forward and what rotation's going to do to that. Because I do see a world if you pick Isak, that now all of a sudden Wilson start 2 games in a row in the league to get Isak to play 2 games in a row in the Champions League, and then they might switch it. So it's a bit of an interesting one. I think the lucky last one that I want to mention is West Ham have decent fixtures as well during this Game Week 9 wildcard. And this is why the Game Week 9 is so popular. It's an international break and look, a lot of Chelsea's fixtures, Spurs fixtures swing. And look, if you're looking at Villa away, who, Villa are decent, but then Everton, Brentford, who've conceding goals, Forest, Burnley, Palace, Spurs, who will concede goals, Fulham, Wolves, before you beat Man United and Arsenal Game Week 18, 19. If that doesn't scream it's Bowen time, nothing screams it's Bowen time as well.
Yeah, so there's definitely plenty of options around Game Week 9. Is there another set of game weeks that you want to particularly bring up for the viewers?
I think if you can even eke it out to Game Week 12. And in Game Week 12, you can get like some Arsenal assets back, like Burnley, Brentford, Wolves, first 3. Brighton, obviously, in Game Week 12 as well, go Sheffield, Forest. You get Newcastle, go, Man United, go Luton, Everton. And then you get 2 hard games in Newcastle, Chelsea, but then Bournemouth as a 4 or a 5 fixture. So it might be the time that if you drop a Bruno, for instance, or something, and then go back. And it also means in a game week 12, you get Forest, Burnley, Palace as the next three for Bowen. It's maybe a differential sort of week to target, but with a lot of good fixtures. Maybe not the sort of game where you're targeting a Salah or a Trent or a Darwin. Might not even be a game where you're targeting a second Man City asset, which with Pep like that probably isn't a bad thing. But it's sort of it allows me to refresh my team and go a bit more templatey. And that means that I can get from game week 13 to game week 27, 28 for that second wild card or free hit sort of territory pretty easier. I think the lucky last one's game week 19. Only issue with game week 19, I mean, you were toying with this idea, getting it all the way to the last week before it gets burnt, the wild card, is that's Boxing Day. If games coming thick and fast and rotation, it may be too volatile, but there's a lot of good fixtures you could target for Boxing Day with a wild card. And as long as you build a good enough team to get you to game week 27, 28, you only have to build a 7-week wild card. And that's not the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, and I don't think it's worth us really unpacking that at this point because that is quite a while away still, and there's obviously going to be a lot that's going to change, between there. But I think not for people that can stretch it to 9 in particular. Like if you're at this point now, I'd be trying to hold as much as possible until game week 9 because there's a clear change. And if you've used it already, then getting to 19 could be really, really difficult because you're probably targeting the guys like the Chelsea and the Spurs guys who the fixtures do turn quite sharply going out of 9. So just some food for thought there with the wild card. I think the rest of what we want to talk about is our ways now that we're going to get to game week 9. Do you want me to start us off here, Dave?
Yeah, you go first because I'm very unsettled into what I'm going to do. It's going to be a long 2 weeks for me.
Yeah, so let me get rid of this part of the screen. Let me add the next one. So I've gone through and mapped out hopefully what my side is going to look like. So from game week 5, I've got 2 transfers in the bank. And the reason why I wanted you to talk about Matty Cash a little bit is because he's part of my transfer plans already. So number 1, at this stage, I need to get João Pedro out of my team because he is just burning a hole at the moment. And it's just I'm going to talk about a minute's risk with another minute's risk, but Julian Alvarez through 4 games has looked absolutely brilliant. He scored 28 points so far through 4 weeks, 2 goals, 3 assists, expected points of 20, but his minutes have been fantastic. So that probably means that he's due for a rotation. I'm not sold on bringing Alvarez in, but there's a world where he does come in for me and I play the pep roulette that way instead of Vardiol. So the other transfer I'm making is Vardiol out for Matty Cash. And you might say, why are you bringing in Matty Cash for the Chelsea, Brighton sort of fixtures around that 4.5 bracket? There's not a solid option for game week 5. So he's particularly coming in for only a couple of weeks for me, but you'll see why long term. So he comes in for Palace at home for me. And then the rest of my team looks solid enough there. I'm riding Jackson as much as I don't want to. I was talking to Damo about this quite a bit today. I'm ready to sell Jackson, but the data's there for Jackson. And I think the reason I picked him was for opportunity, and the opportunity is there. So you're talking about having 14 shots in the box through 4 games for 1 goal. That's just nuts numbers, and his XG's of 3. So there's going to be a point where that data turns. He does miss, that sitter inside the 6-yard box this week as well. If he scores that, it's a completely different game week for me as well. So hopefully Matt Turner can play after looking pretty good against Chelsea as well, against Burnley at home, and then that might be the last time he sees the field for me. Game week 6, we then move 1 transfer, and it's Dan Burn potentially coming in for me for what's his name? Is it Bauer? What's his name from Burnley? Bayer, that's it. So just trying to use some of my funds just to get my team playable up to game week 9. So my plan is to keep Salah. So Bayer goes out, Burn comes in. This has to be Burn or Botman. If Botman's back fit, it's probably Botman, but I just want one of those 4.5 Newcastle defenders to get me up to the wild card. So that's game week 6. Game week 7 is a roll. So I still keep Alvarez for the run. I keep Jackson for their run. Matty Cash still sits the bench. So he plays game week 5 for me, and then he hits the bench for 2 weeks because of the run of fixtures that Newcastle get. Then we go into game week 8. So we're obviously 2 weeks, or we're 1 week away from this with 2 transfers. Then it was Matoma and Saka go out in game week 8 for Sterling and Maddison, who have Luton and Burnley. So that's my play. And then I can bench Alvarez for that game and then bench Burn and bring Cash back in for Wolves. That gets me to game week 9 and the international break. And that is, I'm just trying to target the best fixtures, really, and I'm just plugging guys in and out. That's obviously dependent on injuries and whatnot, but I think the way that I'm then structuring that team, I've got enough cover on the bench that if I have to play one of those defenders against a Brighton or a Brentford, some of those, or Man United, I can just throw someone on for a week and then make the move I still want to make, because I know that I'm going to that game week 9 wildcard. So I feel like it's in a good spot. It just means that I need to hang on to Nicholas Jackson, which might be harder if he keeps missing all these chances. But the rest of my team shape there, I feel, is okay, sitting in that 3-4-3, 4-4-2 shape. But I'll just have to ride it and go from there.
Beautiful. Nah, look.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's good. I think there's definitely a very good plan. We're in 2 slightly different spots in terms of midfielders and stuff. But I like the idea and I like the thinking.
I just don't want to chase people that have already got points. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And if Bruno and Maddison had the best fixtures, then I would go for them. But I feel like the options I've gone for there, and the midfield's actually not my worst part of my team. Like, my whole midfield returned this week. So
correct.
I can get away with the midfield, but I'm lacking up front because I've been carrying João Pedro and bloody Jackson the whole time. I've got 2 returns out of them all year.
Yeah. And look, that's the frustrating part. And that's the thing I want to say to everyone listening is don't chase previous points. Look to the future points and look to the future fixtures who's got good data. And that's where I'm in a dilemma, because if you look at my team right now, as it stands, without me making a transfer, I've got the Stupid against Man United. I've got Archer against Spurs, which, look, Spurs are Spurs and Archer is a GOAT, right? But I've got a really, really good midfield 5 of, against Salah against Wolves. Maddison I've had since game week 1, so against Sheffield, definitely not dropping in. Bruno's looks outstanding numbers-wise, but hasn't had the best of the year, but he's got Brighton and Burnley and Palace, so I'm not really selling him. And then I've got Saka, who's got Everton, Spurs, Bournemouth. And look, as much as Saka had a quiet one, he is still the talisman for Arsenal. And look, when we're at 6.8, it's got Newcastle, then Everton, then Forest. So tell me, out of those midfield 5, who am I selling to free up funds? It makes it very difficult as a decision. Obviously, Salah's the one, and I'll show you what I'll do if I do sell Salah this week. And so the only reason why it will be to Salah is to allow me to get Pedro, because I've got the same issue with you, up to somebody. And it allows me then also to probably, instead of getting rid of a Stupid who I can keep for game week 6, who's got Bournemouth, right? It allows me to get Bulldog up. And you guys might be screaming at me, or Damien, double Chelsea defence. I like the fixtures. This game week, Bournemouth. Yes, Bournemouth can go out there and score, and yes, I think Bournemouth will. But I also do think there's a lot, quite a percentage of opportunity that Cole and Shaw do keep a clean sheet too.
Yeah.
So, if I'm looking at this game week and I've got 2 options, I've got 2 free transfers, is I've got 0.5 in the bank. So if I was just to remove Pedro and then roll the transfer, there's not really many 6.0 strikers out there.
Strikers.
Everyone's had a price wise that's pretty good. I don't want to touch Beto. Ferguson's got Man United, then Bournemouth and Villa, and we don't know about his minutes. The one that I'm actually thinking of is one that you've alluded to, and that's Odsonne Edouard, because you love his data. Talk to me through his data, because you've looked at this a little bit more.
Yeah, I've gone into his depth massively. So he's had the second most amount of shots overall. I believe he's had 19, I think, in total.
18 shots in the box.
There you go. And Palace have been creating chances, and they've just not been taking them. He's scored 3 and 4, though, and he's, the fixtures for Palace haven't been fantastic either. So I think he scored in game week 1 and game week 4 from memory.
Yep.
I don't think it has it there anyway. But he's just someone who that team just revolves around from an attacking perspective. So he is just locked in. AU always plays off one wing. Mateta will come on off the bench, but he'll play in a 2 at that point. And Eze is someone who can create just, straight out of nothing things for Edouard as well. And he's actually a pretty good finisher. He did miss a sitter from the top of the 6-yard box as well. I think he just got really complacent. I don't know if you've seen it yet in the highlights if you've watched it. But he just got really complacent and just sort of passed the ball and just just completely muffed it up. But what is an interesting stat, though, was at the weekend when he scored 2, it was the first time since his debut that he's had multiple goals in a game for Palace. So he might not be a monster returner, but he could be someone that in some good fixtures you can plug him in. 5.5, that's what we said about João Pedro, and João Pedro will worry about the minutes. Odsonne Edouard is a 5.5 you can plug in for good fixtures that you don't have to worry about minutes. But I don't know if now's the time. If you've got 5 really good midfielders, and for me, if in your team, it would be dependent on the fixtures you get between Archer, Edouard, and your 5 midfielders. So if you only, and that's the thing. So that's where I'd be looking at it. But
and that's the thing. If you look at Edouard's, right, for instance, and it's Villa, Fulham, United, Forest, it's great. Like, don't get me wrong, 2 of those 4, you love it, and Villa's not the worst, right? But you have a look at
United at the moment.
Yeah, but if you look at Archers, they got Spurs, scoreable game, Newcastle, West Ham, but you also you get a clash of Fulham away and Forest at home, and you get that big dilemma in game week 8. Archer, we know is going to be Sheffield's main man, and we've just seen what he can do against Everton. And Fulham are definitely as bad as what Everton are, right?
Yeah.
And then you got Edouard against Forest, who, to be fair, Forest have, as much as they've given away some sort of XG this year, they are a team that love to sit deep and frustrate and then hit on the break. So I think you get a benching dilemma. Now, does that mean then that you just hold Pedro through? I don't think that's the issue. I don't think you can do that either, which means that for me, I'm in a bit of a weird situation of, well, what's the best decision next? Is it Salah down to, a Son, or Salah down to a 7 mil or 6.5 mil?
Sterling.
Yeah, something like that.
Diaby.
Or do we bite the bullet and say, even though Bruno's got good fixtures coming up, maybe it's Bruno down and keep Salah this time, this long term, because of how consistent he's been? It's a bit of a weird one for me because I don't have that second striker option. And obviously the third option that I would toying with is Semenyo. Only problem is that he's got Chelsea, Brighton, Arsenal next 3 before Everton away in game week 8. Semenyo is the type of guy that on your wild card with Wolves, Burnley, and then longer term, a bit better for Bournemouth, is the guy you target. So I feel like I'm in a hard place in a rock. I've already got Botman, which is great with Stupid. I think my move this game week is honestly going to be something along the lines of a Salah or a Bruno down to a cheaper midfielder to allow me to get Bulldog up to a better defender and Pedro out next week, or Pedro out this week and you do Dodgy up next week. Like, if I was to draw that up, which midfielder would you choose out of this list? Out of the 9.0 list, yes, Son's great. Son then goes to Arsenal, Liverpool though after Sheffield. So have you missed the boat?
If you knew that Foden was going to start, it's Foden. But
you don't.
That's the concern, which is why I'm going after Alvarez, because I'm trying to really hit those fixtures. But I've got some money sitting there in the bank, so that's how I'm able to get there.
Is it Sterling after what we've seen from Chelsea, Bournemouth, Villa, and Fulham?
I mean, Sterling. If Nicholas Jackson knows how to finish, Sterling walks away with an assist, and everyone goes
correct.
Yeah. So there's hindsight there, and everything that's positive that's happening for Chelsea is happening really down the right. Chilwell, he's gotten into some okay spots, but he hasn't looked like he did against Liverpool, really. Like, to be honest, Gusto had the game against Luton, not Chilwell. Did they have game week 2? They lost. West Ham, West Ham, they lost 2. Nothing really from Chilwell. So, like, Chilwell's been transferred in heavily, and he's gone up quite a bit, but he's not, shown that he's essential. I think a lot of the play so far has come down the right. What I'd be concerned with Chelsea is, are they going to go back to the 4-2-3-1 at any point? Because they actually looked really good in pre-season. And how does that impact? I'm not saying that it impacts anyone positively or negatively, but whenever there's a system change, we have to be mindful that there will be things that change as well.
Correct. And if I was to remove Salah, which would pain me, and I don't even know if I could do it physically, right? It would be for Sterling with the next 3 fixtures being Bournemouth, Villa, Fulham, Burnley, and then you're wildcarding out of Arsenal anyway to get Salah back.
Yeah.
It gives me a really solid run of fixtures across the board. Yes, Bruno could be a potential mistake, selling Salah, not Bruno, but it gives me his 5.7 mil in the bank, and that gives me the funds to go to Pedro to anyone. And with the fixture run for the forwards at the moment, Palace, Chelsea, Brighton for Watkins Air. Not touching Darwin just yet, but I really think getting on the likes of maybe Isaac early, Brentford, Sheffield, Burnley, West Ham wouldn't be the worst.
Palace.
Yeah. And then, he's wildcarded out of Palace at that stage. Yeah. Or I could even go to someone like this in Wissa, right? Who's got Newcastle this game week, but then Everton, Forest. Pardon? They are.
And Newcastle showing that they can concede.
So it's a weird situation because if I do this and just let's pick Isaac for right, that gives me 3.5 in the bank with this team.
Yeah.
Right. A decent bench that only gets better next game week because it would be Bulldog to Trippier.
Yeah.
Because I got money in the bank. And all of a sudden I still got 1 mil in the bank. Trippier's going to play over
Colwill.
Yeah. Isaac's going to come in over Archer. And I get the really... And then I get the really, really... What do you do with Botman sort of decision? No. That's the issue. Because Botman, from reports, is going to be back from next game week because he's only about a week away and could have made the team, but decided against it. And then it's all of a sudden, Botman against Sheffield probably keeps a clean sheet. But do you take Chilwell at home against Villa for attacking returns at the moment?
No, you ride the fullbacks. You ride those fullbacks with those two fixtures.
Yeah, but if you look at that team after 2 game weeks, that's game week 6. I've got Bournemouth, Sheffield, Villa, a very stacked 5, Isaac and Haaland up top.
And a good bench.
And then in game week 7, I've got one free.
You want to roll. Yeah, you want to roll into 8.
I could roll to get 2 and 8 with 1 mil in the bank.
Which is what I've done.
And even then, my team looks decent. Archer for me needs to play against Fulham, so I'd have to drop someone here. I don't know who.
Well,
it's probably,
I'm selling Saka in 8.
I'm probably dropping Saka to my bench.
If you want to bring him back in, I guess it's the question on your wild card. But then it doesn't really matter, does it? If you're selling them on your wild card, it's not.
Yeah, but you lose the value you got in him anyway, right? And that gets me to game week 8. Look, it yet again leaves me in the spot where Stoopy and Botman need to make a decision there again, or Colwill against Burnley, which is probably the way I would go, actually, is probably Colwill for Burnley. And with just 2 moves this game week and dropping Salah, I get a team that can get me to game week 9 and wildcarding back.
Yeah.
Right? My only issue with this is that 2 moves of Isaac and Sterling going to be better than Salah and someone else? That's the question.
Say it's odds in Edouard and Salah. The odds in Edouard and Salah beat Sterling and Isaac. That's the question.
Yeah, that's correct. And I honestly think that it's...
I'm leaning Salah, Edouard, because of Salah's fixtures elevate that side of that equation. And if Edouard does get 2 or 3 returns in those 4 weeks, then that's the big decision. And I've got to make that decision as well because I've taken minutes risk with Vardiol. Do I take another minutes risk in Alvarez, or do I save 1.2 and back what I'm saying and believe in Edouard? The difference with me and Edouard is if I bring Edouard in, I've got to play him most weeks. That's the difference. So I don't have to, but I've got Jackson there. And again, Jackson's not, locked in when it comes to finishing his chances. So I've got a little bit to consider there as well. Let us know in the comments as well. What would you guys do in the same situation? Would you look at an Isaac? Because what we're comparing, Damo, are 2 players that are significant minutes risks that are shown that they're starting, though. Isaac started every game. Alvarez has started every game. So we're taking on that they might come off or that they might not. Well, Isaac will start. I don't see a world where Isaac doesn't start. But same with Alvarez. Until De Bruyne's back, I don't really see a world. I think he's locked in that number 10-y sort of second striker role anyway. And City don't have another player fit to play the same way Alvarez does. So I feel like they're both kind of locked into the, what they are at the moment. Yeah. But the question comes back to, does Edouard free up what you need moving forward?
Yeah, look, if I take Pedro to Edouard, I can still keep 0.5 in the bank and it's only 1 transfer. My question then becomes, do you play Edouard or you just punt with Archer again? Because it's Spurs and Spurs will concede, you feel?
At home, I think Spurs will be better than away.
Yeah, which then makes me question with my second move, do I get Udogie in and starting
I like that.
Stupian with no money in the bank. It says 0.2, but I don't think there is. Actually, it would be because Udoji's price has gone up.
Yeah.
So I can't actually do that.
And I don't think Spurs really have unless you go Pedro Porro, who's locked in. But that's more targeting Spurs. And then they go Arsenal and Liverpool. So if you go on Spurs, I feel like you're going Udoji or no one.
Yeah, correct.
Unless you want Romero, because we saw how much he can hit a bloody ball on the weekend too. And has scored twice this year.
Would you tell me I'm crazy if I sold Bruno Fernandes right now?
No, because I'm not targeting him. But
I think if you have him, you have to hold him for Brighton, Burnley, Palace, Brentford.
I think you hold him. I wouldn't sell it. I'd sell Saka before I sell Bruno.
You sold Saka before Everton, Spurs, Bournemouth?
I wouldn't want to sell him before Everton, but if I'm selling him, I'm selling Saka before Bruno. I've seen more Bruno being involved than Saka this year. Yeah, your team's in a hard spot.
Yeah, this is the issue because I need to get a striker in that's going to play over Archer, I feel. And I get two good fixtures from Edward. I think Villa's okay. Fulham's really good. Man United's
not the worst.
Whatever. But I'd probably pay Archer at West Ham.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then in game
and then you get him back for Forest.
Yeah.
Well, then you get Edward back for Forest, so it's not the worst.
Yeah, but then I also have Archer on my bench for Fulham. I would probably want to play 3 up front.
And drop Saka. Yeah, because Saka will come off that week anyway.
Yeah, it's a tough... Yeah, correct. Well, it's a tough decision. And then I've got 0.4 in the bank, and I need to get rid of Bulldog and arguably get a defender in for a Stupian. I don't want to sell
Maybe it's
Stupian
Matty Cash. That's what I've done for that week. I've gone cash that week because they've got they're playing Crystal Palace. But there wasn't a standout 4.5 defender that week for me. Or you bank that Botman's fit, but then it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to be playing against someone you got in your team. So
yeah, look, to be fair, if Botman's fit, he plays against Brentford. I don't particularly want that one either.
Yeah, otherwise you go cash and you go. Hopefully you get an attacking return.
Yeah, so I'll probably
just Stupid in against Man United. Yeah, it's not the end of the world. But look, there's definitely what we're hoping to get out of this conversation, guys, is that there's ways to navigate your team from now to game week 9. There's especially, I think a lot of people have rolled the transfer from last week into this week. So if you've got 2 transfers coming out of the international break, you should be in a spot where you can make those 2 if you need to and be in a solid spot, at this point heading into game week 9. So hopefully go on to Fantasy Football Hub. We're not sponsored by them by any means, but that's what we use to get our data and start mapping our teams out so that we can try and do what we've done here in front of you guys tonight and make sure that we're in a spot that gets us through the next month of Premier League football. So I'm sure that we're going to do lots of tinkering between now and the deadline because it is a long time between what we can do, but we're at a point where our teams are fine. Don't panic. I can see Damo's already thinking of other moves. I think we'll give him one more opportunity to talk us through his thoughts before we wrap up, unless you've got any questions that you want to put in the chat.
I've got an idea.
Here we go. Talk us through
I don't like this idea. But I've obviously get Edward in for Pedro. Don't drop Haaland, stupid thing. But anyway, right. And then Edward comes into the team.
Yep.
Now Haaland's not captain, make him captain. Pickford was on my bench. I know he goes Man City then Liverpool, but if I go from Pickford to Areola, that frees up funds.
I just don't see Turner starting though at this point.
Yeah, but Areola will just play long term.
Yeah,
I think Turner's going to play next week. They're not dropping him after a clean sheet against Chelsea.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So he gets through the 1 week, and then I can get Udoji in for a hit. I don't like taking hits. But at least with that hit, it gives me 1 in the bank. It allows me to get Edward in. It allows me to get Archer in. It allows me to have Botman in another extra week to see if he's fit. And even though it's 1 hit, it's now I still got Salah, still got Madison, still got Bruno, still got Saka, still got Mbeumo. I got 2 playing defenders on the bench in Udoji and Botman that swap in and out for when there's bad fixtures up here.
Yeah.
And then it's not too
bad.
And
then you got the Archer-Edward rotation as well.
Correct. And it's not.
My worry is that you have to do that pretty soon because one of those guys is going up at some point.
Yeah, which makes me yet again go, is that worth it?
0.1 saves you one price rise, but it's just, it's not ideal.
Nah. So
especially to have to take a hit to do that.
And this is where, as much as I had a good start, I knew this was my problem going with a big, heavy 5 and not having a big second striker and having Pedro. Because if Pedro didn't start, doing what he's doing now, it gives you that issue of what do you do?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, he started last game week. There's a potential where you just keep him for another game week and then see what happens. Yeah, and you don't rush him up. And then my move is...
The problem was Welbeck was injured.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If Welbeck's fit coming out of the international break, do they go Ferguson Welbeck again? I just don't want that headache anymore.
Correct. I hear you.
Too hard to predict. And Pedro didn't look good either. That's the other issue. If he looked good, then it'd be a different story, but he didn't do anything.
Because if it's going to be... We keep Pedro, it's Pickford down to Areola, and it's going to be Udogie. Yeah, and I get 0.2 in the bank. I can play Udogie over Estupiñán this week, and we get one extra week of Joe Pedro data.
Yeah.
Of what's going to happen with Joe Pedro.
And then you can go Edward anyway if you need to.
And then it allows me in game week 6, unless the prices go ballistic, is... but then you're caught in the trap. Oh my God, if that's going to be the case, you've got to play Joe Pedro against Bournemouth now if he's going to start. And then all of a sudden you get in that trap yet again. But
yeah,
I think as well as to get there, I'm actually leaning to what I've just done there. I'm actually leaning that if everyone's fit, everyone's fine, everyone's firing, and keep Salah in this team, it's going to be Pickford down the Areola to get Udogie in, which at least gives me 1 week where I don't have to pay Estupiñán, and Estupiñán and Udogie can just switch in and out with Colwell and Chilwell when needed. And
Pedro can sit there as your third sub until a wild card.
Well, Pedro will play over Archer when the fixtures link up. But in game week 8, Archer, I'm telling you right now, captainable against Fulham, captainable.
And you probably play him in 7 against West Ham as well there.
Yeah, probably. But that's the thing. And look, even if you're not happy with your team, where I'm not with the template of my team, I'm still happy with the big midfield 5 hitting midfielders. And it's only got to get to game week 9 to wildcard.
Yeah.
That's 4 game weeks. And with a really good start, if you have a few suboptimal weeks, you're still going to be in a decent position once you wildcard to still be, in a run.
And things even out in fantasy as well. And that's the thing. So, you've got no Jackson. There's going to be a point where Jackson couldn't return for a couple of weeks in a row, and that balance will happen. So that's just sort of where it is for me at the moment. So, look, lots to go through, lots happening. If you have questions over the long international break, we'll be back hopefully next week for 2 streams. Maybe not next week, but moving forward when it's no international break, with a Monday and a Thursday, so we can hit the review and a preview and do them separately moving forward. So if you're keen for that, make sure, number one, if you're an audio listener, that you're over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for that content. If you like to see us talk through and go through numbers, and you're a visual person, make sure you come over to FPL Dopata and have a look at the stream as it happens live and get in the chat as well. And if you want that further bit of communication overall with our community, make sure you get in the Discord, which should be in the description, which I need to make sure I do put in for the video because there's a separate description for that as well. So, Damo, once again, thank you.
That's all right, mate. Anytime, always happy to be in the show and do the right things and get in here and talk all the FPL goodness.
Yeah, and hopefully we can lock in this Monday slot a bit more as well. It's a bit Mondays get a bit finicky when it comes to the Tuesday game, but I think it's good to get the sounding board out as quick as possible after a weekend when it can be quite frustrating, and it's nice to talk through things. So if you are excited for next week, make sure you go along all those social channels, and we'll see you guys next week for our Game Week 5 full preview.